August 27th is a red-letter day in military history, not because it's the day on which Romania joined World War I in 1916 in the hope of seizing Transylvania. Frankly, that was under the heading of, it didn't even seem like a good idea at the time. Now, August 27th is important because on that day, back in 1776, William Howe defeated the Americans at the Battle of Brooklyn Heights, captured Washington and his senior staff, and snuffed out the colonial revolt. No, wait a minute. He didn't. Howe did defeat Washington at Brooklyn Heights. He had two good chances to capture Washington and his officers, but he let them slip through his fingers. It's a part of a pattern of curious lethargy in Howe's conduct as commander of the British armies in America. Now, some people have put it down to the laziness of the British aristocrat, or alcoholism, or spending too much time with his mistress. But actually, Howe was widely regarded as one of the best soldiers in the British Army before he took command of the Americas and afterwards. He'd led a dangerous amphibious assault at the capture of Louisbourg in 1758. He'd also commanded a battalion under Wolfe at the Plains of Abraham. In fact, he was the man chosen to lead them up the cliff, and that worked out pretty well for the British. So there's another explanation here. See, after Brooklyn Heights, Howe didn't pursue Washington very aggressively. Washington went into winter quarters at Valley Forge. Howe more or less left him alone. In 1777, he devised a plan. He would move north. Gentleman Johnny Burgoyne would come south from Canada. They'd catch the Americans in a pincer movement and encircle them. Well, Burgoyne came south, but Howe changed his mind. He went and captured Philadelphia, which looked pretty good on paper, but hung Burgoyne out to dry. He was defeated at Saratoga, forced to surrender his entire army. A stunning defeat that convinced the French that maybe the rebels could win the war, brought them in on the American side, and helped lead to the final victory at Yorktown and independence. So if Howe wasn't incompetent or incapacitated by drink, what was behind his behavior and that of his brother Richard, one of Britain's leading admirals? I think maybe, just maybe, Howe didn't want to win the war. Now, I don't like conspiracy theories, and I don't see how you'd prove this unless some letter should surface in which he writes to Richard and says, we're losing it, it's in the bag. But the fact is that he'd been an MP for Nottingham since the 1750s. He'd opposed harsh measures against the colonists, including the Intolerable Acts. In 1774, he told his constituents he would resist service in America and that he didn't think the whole British Army could conquer the colonists. When he was nevertheless picked to head the British Army there, he said he would go rather than acquire the odium of refusing to serve his country in its time of need. But he just didn't try that hard. After Saratoga, he hung out in Philadelphia partying, waiting for his letter of resignation to be accepted. Richard also resigned, and they both went home. What's also interesting about the story is that when they got back to Britain, they were criticized for the way they conducted the war. They demanded a parliamentary inquiry. It was held, and it cleared them, which suggests to me that a lot of people in the British establishment understood that denying liberty to the colonists and then trying to crush them militarily had been a terrible mistake and a betrayal of British traditions. I think it's revealing that both William and Richard went on to serve their country. William was given important posts in the French Revolutionary Wars. He was also a member of the Privy Council. Richard commanded the Channel Fleet and won a brilliant victory. So I think that they didn't fight hard against the Americans because they didn't want to win the war. And I think if there's ever a time to raise a glass to a man who threw a war, it's to William Howe on August 27th because he was both a patriot and a lover of liberty.